Okay, hello everybody. My name is Claudia Greiner and welcome to the 11th annual Limud Winnipeg and the first virtual one. This session is being recorded and we are very glad to have you with us for the next 50 minutes. Please put your questions in the chat and will be answered at the end unless it's really relevant to the moment that we are talking. Limud Winnipeg is a non-for-profit organization with volunteers based and one staff person. The support of donors, it's detrimental to our success, and we believe in Jewish education and Jewish culture from a diverse and pluralistic view. Even in this year, we must meet virtually when we would rather be schmoozing in our hallways of Grey Academy. We're pleased to take advantage of this virtual platform. Presenters, participants, and hosts from around the world, like the one I'm very pleased to introduce now. Please welcome Naomi Brownstein, and she will be talking about Ten Gav and my chance and yours to give back. Please, let's welcome Naomi.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I hope so. I'm speaking to you from Ra'anana in Israel, where I live. And I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. I've looked at videos from previous Winnipeg Limuds, and the warmth of your community shines through. I know the idea behind Limud is that everyone can be a teacher. I hope I managed to prove that true in our time together. So thank you for letting me participate. I've been invited to share with you a bit about my personal journey and how I came to launch Ten Gav, which is a charitable startup based in Israel, with my founder and with my co-founder and partner, Vivi Mann. I hope you can all see the screen. I hope that by the end of our time together, you'll have gotten at least one of these things from me. I hope that you'll have a better understanding of the needs of Israel's poor. I hope that that knowledge will help you decide how and where to give your own charitable dollars so that you experience giving in a meaningful way. And I hope that you'll be inspired by some of the players that I'm going to introduce you to today, both the recipients of Ten Gav and perhaps more by the social workers that we work with. The participants in my journey. This is a recent photo of my family taken at my daughter's wedding in June. And this is my husband, Gerald, who is a lawyer and who also farms a couple of thousand acres of grain crops just a few hundred kilometers away from you in Kamsack, Saskatchewan. Here's our farm. I know it's very unusual. So unusual that Kinsey Posen even did a human interest story on us back in 2018 for the Jewish Post. So we have a rather strong connection to Western Canada, which contributes to my personal pleasure in joining you today. Here are my children. This is the kids shortly after we made Aliyah in 1993. That is a picture of my eldest son around the time the Gaza war began in 2014 when he was called up. And that is when Ten Gav was launched. That's my other son, who's a musician and just put out an album of music based on Jewish scripture and jazz. This is my daughter, Shira, who sells her paintings on her own website and studies textile design at Shenkar College in Tel Aviv. And this is my youngest daughter, Liat, who is studying nursing. And if you know anything about Sydney, Australia, you'll recognize Bondi Beach behind her. And that's where she did a shlichut last year. Very importantly, this is my co-voluntary chairman of Ten Gav, Vivi Mann, who was originally from Baltimore. And this is a page from our website, tengav.org. And you can see a few personal stories that are here on this example. And this is Michelle and Danita Aziza of Winnipeg, who had a special role to play in getting Ten Gav off the ground. So I hope I've piqued your curiosity enough to listen to my story about when, how, and why I started Ten Gav. What is Ten Gav? Ten Gav is an internet crowdfunding platform that matches donors to individuals and families with modest needs that have been submitted for backing by social services professionals in Israel. Our mission is to increase the circle of givers to needy Israeli families by providing donors around the world with direct access to real people with real needs. What does that mean? The first thing to understand is that Ten Gav receives its applications from social workers around Israel for goods and services that their clients need, but that they cannot fund with existing resources at their disposal. Sometimes they ask for basic needs like fridges, ovens, washing machines, and beds. And sometimes for computers, course tuitions, sometimes for educational or psychological evaluations, sometimes for medical accessories and therapies. So we crowdfund these requests by posting them on our website, tengav.org. And we then deliver the goods or pay the supplier, as the case may be, directly. No monies are given to a recipient. So if we look together, you'll see that a social worker will identify a particular need, and then she'll submit an application. Ten Gav committee has its own approvals committee that will approve it or not. We'll post it on the website. A donor can visit and choose a request that he or she wants to give to. Once the request is fully funded, Ten Gav orders the item. The social worker then confirms that the item's been delivered and the family gets what it needs. And the donor gets a fully funded letter when that's done. A little bit about my personal journey. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. I did a BA at York University, and then I went to law school at Osgoode Hall. I worked at Minden Gross in Toronto in private practice before my husband and I made Aliyah in 1993, a long time ago, with 3 little ones. Those first years in Israel were spent trying to figure out how to successfully pay the bills and get our family adjusted to our new home. I spent most of my time in those early years after arriving being a stay-at-home mom in a country with a very short work day, a school day. And I volunteered in the schools, and I volunteered in the municipal education department and in the shul, and I took various courses that ultimately culminated in me returning to university and doing a master's in social work at Tel Aviv University. I'm going to stop the share here for a minute because I want to speak to you and have your full attention. Ra'anana is a great community of Olim, and I had a very capable friend there who had lots of experience volunteering with social services. Vivi Mann was previously a management consultant before her Aliyah, and she had been running the citywide Pesach food drive for years already. Ra'anana is a city of about 100,000 people, so that's a pretty big volunteer job. She was also managing one of the local shul's rather large tzedakah funds. And she would share with me the stories of so many people with so many different needs. And I would listen and say things like, but I know that so many people would want to help them. Anyways, one conversation led to another, and soon enough, we began talking about working together, about building something that could make a real contribution to Israeli society. Ironically, without knowing that we had begun speaking with each other, a friend of ours, Joseph Gittler, who some of you may know as the founder and voluntary chairman of Leket, Israel's national food bank, he approached each of us separately and suggested that we get together and look at some of the crowdfunding social ventures that were beginning to pop up in the United States and to think about bringing something like that to Israel. So we took that as a sign that perhaps we were onto something, and we began our research. Ten Gav ultimately grew out of this two-pronged belief that we had. One, that Israel's poor had vast needs that were not being met by existing social services. And two, that good people in Israel and around the world really did want to help, but some things were getting in the way. I'm just going to go back to our share screen for a second. Excuse me. So we talked and we talked, and we tweaked and we tweaked, and we spent hours and hours and days planning. And finally, we worked on identifying just what those things were that were getting in the way of people giving. And we proceeded to build a giving experience to meet those obstacles and to overcome them. What exactly am I referring to? Well, we believe that people today, and things have changed with technology, but we believe that people today want to feel a real personal connection with the recipient of their hard-earned dollars. So we decided to build a platform that would share a personal story. The names would be changed, but the details would be true. We also believed that people wanted to know that their money was actually going to help a real person in need. So we decided, a very good decision, that we would turn to the social services network to get our cases, and that we would provide the donors with the name of the social worker and the agency that submitted it. Each application would be co-signed by the social worker supervisor, and it should be accompanied by a full social services report. Fourth, We believed that people wanted to know that their money was making a difference. So we decided to cap the request at about $1,500. That way, a donor's money wouldn't get lost in a sea of monies. For example, in the case of a $150,000 surgery where your $100 or whatever it was you were going to give, you would feel that it had no impact. In fact, I can tell you that years later, usually one to five people fully fund a case on the Ten Gav website. And that impact impacts directly on a needy family. Finally, we believe that too many people don't really want their donation to cover operating costs. There's a lack of faith and trust. Those costs are kept modest. So we made the decision that we are trying to sustain, which is to fundraise separately to cover administrative costs so that all of a donor's gift to a case online would go to that case. Now, that was, I'm going to stop one more time. That was the spring of 2014. So we went out and we hired a web design and development company to build us a website, and we waited for them to do their work. Now the summer arrived, and with it the kidnapping and the murder of the three boys, you may recall, Eyal Yifrach, Gilad Shar, and Naftali Franco. I like to say their names a second time so we remember them. Eyal Yifrach, Gilad Shar, and Naftali Franco. Then the subsequent war, the war in Gaza, known as Tzuk Eitan in Hebrew, or Operation Protective Edge in English. Hamas was firing rockets into Israel, and we sent ground troops into Gaza. The situation for Israel's southern residents was impossible. You may recall how often they had to run into their shelters and their safe rooms and the trauma caused to them and their families and the disruption to their lives. Mid-July came, and as was my custom, this is the personal side of the story, I flew to Canada to join my husband at our cottage in Saskatchewan. Shortly after I arrived, I got a call from my dear friends, Danita and Michelle, who, because they are good friends, were aware of what I had been working on with Vivi. Then I will call it the nameless Ten Gav. We hadn't come up with the name yet. And they asked if we were operational yet, which we were not. And then they asked me if there was any way that we could become operational, because they wanted to donate a certain chunk of money to get out to people in the South immediately. That was a challenge and an opportunity that we could not walk from, and they were right. The need was there, and it was immediate. So while my partner Vivi got in her car in the middle of a war and visited social workers in Steyrut, I sat at my desk in my cottage in the middle of Saskatchewan and built our first website using Wix. We took Danita and Michelle's money, and then we raised more through the website and just got to work. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what we had anticipated, but as they say, carpe diem, we had no choice but to seize the moment, and we just got on with it. We purchased that summer and we donated kits to those social workers and field workers that were running camps for the kids in the shelters. And we met requests for basic needs like fridges and ovens and washing machines for the city's poor. When times are tough, the poor tend to suffer more, and they were suffering. So we created our first relationships with social services agencies that summer, and that was the beginning of Ten Gav. It's a few years later. We've gone through a few websites since then, and I want to share with you now, go back to our share screen. If you'll bear with me for a second, a movie that we've prepared to tell you a little bit more clearly how we operate. Sorry. Here we go.
Who's got your back? Israel's poor have vast needs. Sometimes all the social workers' help and all the government assistance just isn't enough. That's why we created Ten Gav, because we know that you want to help needy Israeli families. We're an Israel-based charity that operates an internet crowdfunding platform. We receive requests from social workers around the country to provide basic needs to families who cannot afford them. Needs like beds, washing machines, ovens, and more. Read a story on our website, choose a family, and help. Together, we're helping needy Israeli families one at a time.
Okay, some Ten Gav facts. We have helped over 2,300 Israeli families with goods and services that they've requested through their social workers so far. We have over 2,100 donors from all over the world, and we have distributed a little over, about $2.3 million Canadian in goods and services since we began. I'm going to give you an example so that you can see 2020 and get an idea of the kinds of things that we distribute. In 2020, we provided assistance to 944 families. We had 13 education evaluations. We had 116 beds. Beds is something we get a lot of requests for. You can see the number of tablets and computers here is very high. That is, of course, a result of Corona. And when I'm going to talk about the Corona Relief Fund a little bit later and the impact of Corona on social services. Electrical appliances, also a big one. Courses, medical accessories, therapies, and rent. Rent is something Ten Gav doesn't usually do. In 2020, we made the decision to entertain rent, assistance with rent payments because of the impact of Corona on the economy. We knew that too many people were going to need that kind of help. Now comes the part that I really want to share with you, and I hope that you'll find interesting. And that is when we discuss Israel's poor, who are they? We've been working with social workers around the country for over 6 years now, and we have read thousands of social services reports describing people's problems and their needs. It's difficult to generalize in talking about the poor or those in need, but it helps to do that in order to understand what we're dealing with. Clients of social services come from several groups, and some, of course, are associated with more than one of these groups. The intergenerational poor, I refer here to poverty that gets passed down from parents to children to grandchildren. These are often the very difficult cases where providing them with basic needs like fridges and beds and appliances is critical. I'll give you the example of the elderly woman in Ashdod whose social worker goes on a home visit and finds her washing clothing in the sink and finds out upon inquiry that the washing machine broke a few months ago and the repairman told her it can't be fixed. And so she's washing clothes in the sink and her husband is incontinent. Or it's the social workers who call us literally crying from Hadera. They've gone on a home visit and they find an elderly Ethiopian couple that are sleeping on tattered mattresses on the floor. Or maybe it's the family just last week that we got a call from a social worker in Tel Aviv because they are currently putting their food in the neighbor's fridge because their fridge is broken and they simply have no extra money put aside to buy a new one. Then there is the working poor. I think that's a term that's used worldwide to discuss those who are working, usually at very, very low paying jobs, and they often stay afloat and pay their bills, but then they might get hit with something extraordinary that puts them in a downward spiral. For example, a mother gets breast cancer, or a special needs child is born in the family, or there is a death of a child, or the death of an income earning parent, or even a divorce. These events result in extra financial expenses. They often require one parent to stop working to care for the ill or the special needs. And then often, in our experience, begins the taking of loans to make ends meet, sometimes even in the gray market, which can lead to all kinds of other problems. The new poor. This refers to families who were more or less middle class or lower middle class, who experienced drastic financial loss, usually due to a failed business that was heavily mortgaged or had large debt associated with it. This population is new to social services. They don't necessarily know how to work with social services. They're very uncomfortable even seeking help, but their needs are very real. Then we have the special populations, poor people, and they are the Ethiopians, then the Haredim, and the Arabs. And there are unique reasons for the poverty in each of those communities, and they have their own needs. Next, at-risk youth and young adults. This is a very large group in Israel, and we receive many requests to assist this population, so much so that we opened an ongoing fund called Project Boost in order to maintain a constant source of funding to meet the ongoing requests we receive. In some cases, at-risk youth may come from more or less normative families with whom they are in conflict, and therefore they find themselves out in the streets literally. For example, a young person who rejects their family's religious or Haredi lifestyle, Or they may come from a family facing multiple challenges, including but not limited to a family in financial distress. And youth in these circumstances without guidance may end up leaving school, they may get involved with drugs, and without any support, emotional, otherwise, they may find themselves out on the street. Women in distress is another population, usually after divorce, often after abusive, even violent relationships. Again, this population represents a good number of requests that we receive. So here too, we opened a fund called Project Onward in order to be able to say yes to requests without relying on crowdfunding them on the website. For those of you who don't know, certain things in Israel are very expensive compared to in North America, for example. It's extremely expensive to set up a home in Israel. And these women often find themselves having to start over again, usually with children to care for and an ex-husband who may or may not be paying child support. So these women have to consider retraining in order to make a better living. And they need help setting up a home. They need a washer, beds, fridge, ovens, all capital expenses that they don't have the funds for. They find themselves at risk of sinking into debt before they even get a chance to get going again. Understanding the needs of Israel's poor is an important part of our work at Ten Gav. I could have called this slide the weak links in the social services system today. Basic needs is every social service agency in Israel has a budget for tangible assistance for beds, fridges, washing machines, and ovens. And the problem is it runs out. And the clientele of social service agencies are families without savings. If the fridge or washer breaks, they haven't the means to buy a new one. If the beds are broken and the mattresses are tattered, the kids will sleep on them anyways. Computers. Computers are something which this past year, it's become a huge need. And there are government programs that are meant to provide them. There are some problems with the government programs. And I would say there was definitely a delay in what took place in getting them out to the people this year. Computers is something which, I don't know that we all think of as a basic need, but I think that we're seeing more and more that it is in the same category almost as beds and fridges and ovens for a family. A family without a computer, especially a welfare family, is at a severe disadvantage, and their children are too. Psychological and educational evaluations. Again, there are budget lines for each agency around the country, but they are limited and the need is great. I want to share with you that Israeli high school exams are national. We have a matriculation system called the Bagrut. And there are easements that are granted to students who can prove need, for example, a learning disability, by way of the results of a recognized evaluation. So they might get extra help. They might get time on a test, or they might get someone to read them their exam questions, or they might get the right to use a calculator, for example. And all of those extra things that they're going to get from a evaluation, they will directly impact on their final marks, on their matriculation results, and on their ability to get accepted into higher education. So the very populations that we want to see succeed and go on to higher education are the ones that can't afford to get that evaluation that will be their ticket to college or university and long-term success. Similarly, there are rights and benefits that are granted by the National Insurance Program of Israel for various psychological conditions that are diagnosed, again, by way of a recognized evaluation. And sometimes that evaluation can be the way that an individual is going to be accepted to participate in a special government program that's geared specifically to help him. There may be financial assistance or incentives awarded to him or her, and there even may be additional rights that are granted to the family. The evaluation is critical in accessing these things, and it is in many cases simply beyond the means of the families that need them the most. Medical accessories, another weak link in medical accessories, although I hesitate to call it a weak link in social services, is medical accessories. Hearing aids, for example, are something which are very highly subsidized by Israeli HMOs. But they still require a personal contribution, often of several thousand shekels. And again, the clientele here doesn't have the money put aside to pay for those things. A disabled child or an adult may need an expensive accessory to enable him or her to use an iPad or a computer. These items are costly and beyond the budget of a welfare family that is dealing with a special needs child that already requires extra payments, either for treatments or even in babysitting the other kids while the parents are taking care of that child. We have funded all kinds of accessories to allow a disabled child, for example, with no hand control, to use an iPad. We've provided accessories for wheelchairs. We've provided telephones that speak for the visually impaired. Another weak link, interestingly, it has to do with support for government programs. The government offers many, many wonderful programs. I'll give you an example, some examples. For youth at risk, there are many vocational courses and programs for those that have sort of dropped out of high school. They may be things like cell phone technician courses or gel manicurists or even professional photography or graphic design. But upon graduation, these same at-risk youth need to come up with the funds for the tools they need, for the manicure kits, for the cameras, for the computers that are the basis for their ability to work and to put to use all that they have learned in their programs. So Ten Gav has been stepping up and providing this much needed assistance to the welfare departments around the country. It's a very wonderful partnership that they are very grateful for. They're very aware of the weak link that they have with respect to the programs they're offering, but they're limited by their own budget constraints. Finally, I would say a weak link in welfare departments around the country is the ability to provide anything out of the box. So a good social worker may see that her client needs something special. A fascinating story that happened early on to us was a social worker in the South, I think it was Ashdod, had 2 visually impaired babies born in her jurisdiction within a month of each other. And she had the creative brainstorm to turn to us because she found a program up in Petah Tikva at a hospital that was coaching parents of visually impaired babies. Now, she knew these were families without resources, and there's no way they were going to get themselves up to Petah Tikva. They didn't have cars, they had other children at home. So she turned to Ten Gav and asked us if we would fund a taxi for both of those parents to attend. I think it was 6 sessions in Petah Tikva to learn how to cope and assist their visually impaired baby. Another example, something out of the box, which I'll share with you, is we had a request from a social worker for a belly dancing instructor's course for a client. And she convinced us. We had to hold off reserving judgment on the value of that. And that was about 2 years ago. And then in the fall, we got another request for the exact same thing. So we decided we better do some follow-up and find out what happened with the first course. And we got a letter back, an email back from the social worker telling us it was a game changer in her life. This woman was now teaching 8 classes a week, basically. And that instructor's course, provided her with a way to make a living. So that was a real Ten Gav success story. We've provided other out-of-the-box items. We've provided gym memberships for at-risk teens where the social worker felt that was critical. Pool entries for families to go during the summer. These are things that, the welfare departments don't have budget lines for those things. We're very proud, in fact, at Ten Gav that we will entertain any application that fits within our guidelines. We give the social workers an opportunity to convince us of the virtue and the importance to her client. I think it's a good time to tell you that we do not deal in food of any kind. We don't give out food vouchers, and we also don't we don't provide any financial assistance to cover debt. And the other thing we don't do, which is definitely needed in Israel, and it is a weak link in social services, is dental care. I may talk about that a little bit more, a little bit later. Okay, I thought I'd share with you 3 case studies that I think are important. The first one is a case that came to us in 2000. It was a treatment bed for Fanny. So I don't know if you can see the screen. Fanny and Ivan Petrov emigrated to Israel from Russia 6 years ago with their 2 children. Both of them had, excuse the typo there, professional positions in Russia, but unfortunately neither of their skill sets could be of use here. That didn't stop them though. Ivan took a full-time job as a factory worker and Fanny worked as a massage therapist. Their income was low, but they made ends meet. Among their challenges have been fighting to get their 22-year-old daughter's citizenship and caring for Ivan's mother who is ill with cancer. When the corona crisis hit, Fanny was left with no work and the family survived on Ivan's salary. The couple is exceptionally frugal. Fanny now wants to start her own business and she needs a treatment bed and she can't afford to buy one. Now, this case was only for $200 and we really hesitated to take it on because we felt it was such a small amount. Surely she should be able to come up with the money, but her social worker convinced us that she had nowhere else to turn. And here, months later, is the follow-up. And the follow-up is that since receiving a massage bed, Fanny has succeeded in meaningfully widening her work in the circle of her clients. In addition to her work at the spa, she now goes to the homes of private clients in the area where she lives. Today, since her work at the spa is not happening due to Corona, she's able to work in her field independently and increase her earnings as she tries to establish herself as an independent business. Here's another case study, driving lessons for Natan. Natan grew up in an ultra-Orthodox home. At the age of 16, he rejected his family's religious lifestyle and he left home. And as a result, his parents cut him off, both emotionally and financially. Despite his hardships, Natan finished high school. He took all of his matriculation exams. He enlisted in the army, was awarded lone soldier status due to his background, and he completed his full army service. Natan has independently supported himself by working as a salesperson in a local store. And with the help of social services, he's now attending a real estate program that ensures him a job upon completion. In order to begin working, however, Natan needs to have a driver's license. He has managed to cover the cost of some lessons, but he can't afford to pay for the remainder. Without a driver's license, he won't be able to break into the real estate world. He's a motivated and driven young man, and with a little help, he can be assured a secure and productive future. So the follow-up, as you can see, is wonderful. As a result of Ten Gav's assistance, Natan took his driving lessons and acquired his license. He was therefore able to continue working in the real estate office, as you can see from his Facebook page. Unfortunately, I can't share with you his Facebook page, but that was a case where the actual social services program matched him up with an employer who was willing to train him and guarantee him a job afterwards, as long as he had a driver's license, which he didn't. So again, that was a perfect way for Ten Gav to get involved, Ten Gav donors, and help out this young man. The last one I'll share with you is a psychodidactic evaluation for Lior. Lior is 14 years old and his parents are financially strapped. His mother works as an accountant for several small businesses while his father is a bus driver and currently looking for work. He goes to school consistently, but has trouble sitting in class, trouble completing his assignments, and trouble regulating his emotions and behavior. Though he's already been diagnosed with ADD, further testing to determine other underlying conditions would allow his teachers and his parents to give Lior the support he needs. With a better understanding of the issues, they could craft a program that would allow him to progress in school and learn to control himself. Lior's parents recognize the importance of this testing for their son's future, but they have not been able to stretch their budgets to meet the cost. So this is an example of what we talked about earlier. It's an example of working poor family, and it's an example of the importance of an evaluation. So Ten Gav donors funded that evaluation, and the guidance counselor recently wrote us some follow-up. The purpose of the evaluation was to determine the underlying causes of Lior's difficulties at school in order to get him appropriate help. The evaluation results provided Lior with affirmation of his abilities to succeed, and the assistance he is receiving gives him both motivation and self-esteem. By the way, the tangible results of the evaluation in Lior's case were that he's now receiving from the school extra tutoring in English. So the schools do get extra hours, which they are entitled to grant to students at their discretion, but those students need to have an evaluation. He's getting extra time for tests, and he's also getting the option of having tests read out to him. So his future is looking quite a bit more promising than it was. We believe in partnerships. And I think that the best decision that Vivi and I made way back at the beginning when we were hammering out our Ten Gav model was the decision to utilize the existing social services network and its professional social workers to assess, to evaluate, to verify, and to submit the requests that we would bring to the giving public. Here you see on the screen some of our partners. We're actually working with about 35 government-funded welfare departments around the country. As in any field, there are great professionals and less great professionals. Israel's social workers, by and large, are completely overworked and underpaid. And yet, we have met and have worked with so many committed, caring, professional individuals who have their hands on the pulse of their clients, who are thinking forward and are doing their best to advocate on their behalf. Perhaps it's a self-selecting group. There is some work involved in submitting a request to us. We do require a full social services report explaining the family circumstances and why we should ask our donors to provide assistance to them. We require bank statements to prove need, and we require 2 price quotes for anything beyond our usual fridges, ovens, washing machines, beds. Those are things that we're now providing using our own suppliers. Having said that, we work quickly, and the time lag from submission of a request to review by the approvals committee and delivery of the goods or payment of the services to the supplier is not more than a month, and it's often less. I'd like you to meet a couple of them today, and I'm going to introduce you right now. This is Sharon Friedman, and I hope that you can see her. Nope. Here we go.
אני שרון פרידמן, עובדת בחטיבת קידום נוער וצעירים, אני מרכזת את הנושא של קשר עם תן גב דרך החטיבה. תן גב מצאה את הנישה שאחרים לא עוזרים ובזה היא עוזרת. העזרה המהירה, העזרה הטובה. אם אדם אין לו מבחינת תפיסה, הוא לא יכול להסתדר, אם אין לו מקרר, אין לו איך לאכול ואיך לצאת לעבודה. אם אין לו אבחון ויש לו בעיות, האבחון הזה משנה לו את החיים. העזרה של תן גב יצרה שינוי אדיר למטופלים שלנו. גם עצם העזרה וגם היחס, הכבוד, ההרגשה שמישהו אכפת לו ממך, אכפת לו מכל הלב, גם אם הוא לא מכיר אותך ולא ראה אותך ולא יראה אותך מעולם. אכפת לו ממך והוא דואג לך בצורה הכי מכובדת והכי יפה שיש. זכות גדולה היא לי לעבוד עם עמותה כמו תן גב. המון תודות.
Okay. I guess I would be remiss if I didn't spend a few minutes talking about the Corona Relief Fund, and I am watching the clock. Unfortunately, Corona hit at a time of great political instability resulting from the machinations that come with having too many elections in Israel. The budget wasn't passed, and the welfare agencies were not getting their funding that was owed to them. In addition, whatever of their clientele who was working, whichever of their clientele was working, were put on unpaid leave. Most of low-paying jobs were, and it was only a matter of time before hardship would increase dramatically. And all this while the social workers themselves were expected to work from home while their own children were at their feet. So we launched the Corona Relief Fund almost immediately in anticipation of great need for computers for students learning remotely, for tablets for the elderly and special needs populations that were feeling very socially isolated because they couldn't participate in their regular programming, and for rent assistance for families that were at risk of losing their homes. In 2020, we helped 580 families with the Corona Fund. We gave out 490 computers. We assisted 87 families with the rent payments, usually at 2 months' rent, to give them a bit of some breathing space. And all in all, we gave out about 1.4 million shekels during that period. So that was an important service that we were able to perform. I'll just back up and say that we saw during that time the need for computers was so great, and unfortunately the government was not coming out quickly enough, was not answering the needs quickly enough. And we were just grateful that we were well placed with our good relationships with social service agencies around the country, that they were able to do an assessment of their needs. And I'll share with you that it was the first time that we didn't only take single requests. So we allowed agencies to submit requests for us for groups of computers at a time. So we gave 40 computers to Dimona and 40 to Sderot, and 40 to Or Akiva and to Netivot, and 25 to Dimona, and 29 to Kiryat Malachi, and so on. We don't ask for thank yous, but we receive many thank yous, and some are more articulate and expressive than others. And all extend their thanks for the item they received, the fridge, the stove, the computer, or the service that they were able to get. But so many of them express the idea that the fact that someone cares about them gives them strength. I'll share a couple with you now from a young adult who received a computer. He writes, words escape me that I can't describe my happiness that you've given me a computer. My gratitude is never ending. In Hebrew, he writes, Marich ad ein sof. From a woman who received rent assistance, I felt that I wasn't alone with my troubles, and I received strength to keep going forward in the hope of returning to regular life. I truly felt that you had my back. I'm going to read a little bit of a longer one from a woman who received a professional camera in order to begin working in the events market. This is going back a little bit after she completed several photography courses, because it's just so articulate and it really covers all the bases that you want to hear when you're giving somebody something as generous as that. I wanted to give my heartfelt thanks to you for your donation to me. The new camera has given me confidence to get work because I can shoot at a high quality. The results are already impressive. As a result of the camera and because of you, I can go out to work with my head raised high. I hope to progress and make a living this way. Thank you very much. I've never been given such a generous gift before. It's very heartwarming to know that there are people in the world who will help those who need assistance to fulfill their dreams and vision. I'm so moved that as I write these words, I have tears in my eyes. I certainly don't take this for granted. I'm going to skip this because we are running out of time. In 2021, this coming year, I'll tell you that we are watching closely the government's distribution of computers and benefits regarding rent and mortgage payments in order to determine whether we're going to continue with our own Corona Relief Fund. We hope to spread the word, like I'm doing today, I hope, about our work in order to broaden the circle of givers to needy families in Israel. And we hope to get more intimate with some of the national programs. In addition to working with specific welfare departments, we have begun working with the National Welfare Department of Social Services. And they have many different programs where they are choosing families to provide holistic, a fuller program of help. So they may be giving them professional counseling, they may be giving them financial counseling, and they may be giving them family counseling, and they may be providing the youth with programs and the impact of being able to help a family who's getting a very full, almost push like that is it's very high impact. So we enjoy and we hope to work more with them. I'm going to conclude by sharing with you that one never knows what the impact is of what you're doing. I'm not sure if Joseph hadn't asked Vivi and I to try and take something like this on, if we would have had the resolve to meet it to its end. And I'm not sure when and how we would have gotten started and put ourselves out there had Danita and Michelle not handed us seed money, if you will, and placed their faith in our ability to do right with it. I never expected to be doing what I'm doing, but each day I'm grateful that I am. So my personal story concludes with where it started. The wonderful guiding principle behind Limud, that everyone has something to teach and share and learn, and I would add, and do. I hope you enjoyed listening to what I've learned along the way. And I'd like to end by introducing you to a social worker named Orit from Kiryat Malachi. She is simply inspiring, and I hope that you will get the thrill that I do, knowing that good people like her are out there trying to make a difference in people's lives in Israel. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to show it to you this way. 1 second. Take you to YouTube. Can you see it? Can somebody tell me?
We can only hear, we can't see.
Okay, that's not good because it's in Hebrew. Let's try one more time. It was working earlier. Oh.
Would you like to place the link on the chat so then people can watch it even after?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, I'll do that after. Perhaps if there are any questions, we can open up for questions now.
There is a question from Nancy. I don't know if you see it there on the chat, or I can read it to you.
I don't see the chat.
Give me 1 second, I will read it. So She says, some possible question from my mind. One, is there a U.S. non-for-profit organization link? Two, have you heard of the U.S. loan organization kiva.org? Your thought of on their model? And three, your bill.
I've lost you. You hear me?
We hear you, but not
We
her.
can't.
Hear me?
now
Okay,
we
so
can
I'll
hear
answer
Claudia.
what I heard. Tengov.org is the name of the website. And yes, we give tax deductible receipts for all the currencies, for Canadian dollars, US dollars. If you pay by credit card online, you get a tax deductible receipt immediately. If you want to pay offline, there is there's a header that explains how to pay offline under Give. If you go to the website, that's all available. You asked if I'm familiar with, did you say Ogen? Or was it something else?
It's kiva.org, K-I-V-A.
Yes, of course, I'm familiar with them. They're a very large organization. They are one of the inspiring, I would say, one of the inspiring crowdfunding type organizations that was popping up around the time we were launching Ten Gav here in Israel.
If I may, so part of the extension of that is in terms of loans, what do you think about loans compared with grants?
Naomi, please unmute yourself. I was unmuting somebody and by accident I muted you.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate, the Ten Gav does not give grants. We only give goods and services. We don't give any money or funding of any kind to a recipient. There is a very good organization in Israel called Ogen that does give out loans, and the welfare departments are aware of them in cases where it's relevant, often for a small business opportunity, sometimes even to purchase a home. So I don't really have anything to comment about loans. We don't deal in loans, but we also don't deal in grants. Our purpose is to provide goods and services, and really to provide people around the world who want to help with a way to do that in an easy and effective way.
Thank you, Naomi, for your presentation. I asked earlier in the chat, but I guess it was pushed way up. Social worker in Israel can approach the organization directly, or in each social service agency, there's a point person that you work directly with them?
Correct. In each social services agency, we have a point person that we work with. As I said earlier, we're working with quite a few social services agencies, and there's a bit of a learning curve in how to submit an application. So they have their own point person, each agency. I want to point out that you have to keep in mind that these agencies have so many needs, and we're so assured that they've had to do an internal review. We only allow them to submit up to 5 to 7 cases a month to Ten Gav. That means that they have to do an internal review of their needs and of their clients and see who needs this item the most. So that's another reason we can be very confident that the cases that are being submitted to us are very urgent and high need cases.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening.
It was very informative, empowering, and of course, everybody can check Ten Gav's website and they can reach there